Facebook. Okay. How about we just on Instagram and we can post the recording on Facebook?
Okay, that sounds good.
Because Facebook is being problematic. So everyone that I love so much, if you're on Facebook, you can join us on Instagram, or you can wait and we will post a recording because Facebook is being problematic. See you later on Instagram.
Okay.
I ended my video. Okay. All right. We'll just do Instagram. It's great. I was really proud of this for a minute.
Okay. It's okay. My laptop was not super great. So, hello to everybody who's joined already. Hi to Jeffrey. I think we have one other person. And to Eliza.
Yeah.
So we're hopping on here today to talk about a little bit of everything. I'm sure everybody has seen the media. I'm sure you've seen Blackout Tuesday, all of that sort of things. And we really wanted to discuss what that looks like for us as title holders and what that can look like for you guys as individuals or title holders as well. Anything else you want to say, Nat?
I think that pretty much covers it. We'll probably go off script a little bit.
Right.
So that plus whatever comes up. And feel free to ask questions if you have them.
Right.
Totally open to talking about whatever people need to talk about right now.
Right.
So I know one of the biggest things for me right now is, yes, on social media, raising awareness, talking about everything, going out and protesting to raise awareness. But beyond that, there are tons of things that we could be doing. And for me, the thing that I want to talk about the most is voting. Because, and actually President Obama, former President Obama, talked about this in his Instagram post. If you saw that, I reposted it.
Mm-hmm.
About how everything we're doing right now with awareness, with protesting, with social media campaigns, it's all important. But ultimately, the goal of these campaigns is to make legislative change. And the best way to make legislative change is to vote people in who are going to fight for us and for the minorities and for the changes that we want. So that's the big one for me. You got anything?
Right, and I think that voting is one of the most important things that's going to come out of all this. I think people are hyper aware right now of what's going on with the world, and everyone's asking the question, well, what can we do? What can I do to, further the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement, or what can I do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And voting, I think, is one of those biggest long-term things, because this is not a one-off situation. And it will continue to not be a one-off situation if we are not voting for the officials that we need to best represent us and to take care and hold those other elected officials accountable. They are the ones who appoint, police officers sometimes and police officials and different things like that. And so we need to make sure that we are absolutely putting our voice out there and voting, yes, in local elections too, like Jeffrey said.
Yeah.
Just all around, just really making sure we're holding our representatives accountable and making sure that they are actually representing what we want, and not that they're doing it out of, political selfish pursuits.
Yeah, not for the money, not for the popularity or the clout or any of the other things.
Right. Yeah, we don't need any more clout chasers for politicians.
We don't need any more movie stars. We need people who understand government.
Absolutely. So I think that's such a good one. And also to backtrack a little bit, I was talking about how we want things to change. So what can we do? That question of what can we do? I think for people right now who are unable to go out and actually physically protest, there are so many other things that you can do. I'm sure y'all have seen. There are petitions going around. There are GoFundMes. There are so many different organizations who need different funds for different things right now. Calling those senators, emailing people, so many different options. So me and Natalie will link some of the things that you can do in our story after this live. It's people, especially because there's so much going on and people are wanting to do as much as possible. People have put it all in one place and made it really easy. So fortunately, there are some just lists out there, but one of the big ones on there that some people are focusing on or not is education as well. I think it's so important to not only educate yourself on what's happening right now, but what has happened in the past to allow this to continue happening. Hi, Melody, Miss Phoenix. There are so many critical issues that have gotten us to this point. For people who are like, well, racism doesn't exist anymore, it's not a problem, you might not be paying attention, because it has very much so been institutionalized in the very roots of our government system and just healthcare system in so many different ways. So, Natalie, do you have any experiences from what you've seen?
Yeah, so especially the institutionalization of racism. I think something that I've seen on the internet right now is the system is broken, but actually the system is working exactly how it's built because it's a racist system. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is America was built to exploit minorities, and so, you know, we can't really argue that like the system is broken. It's working exactly how it's meant to be, and that's just the fact of life right now. And that is why voting and getting out there, changing your mindset is so important. Racism is so institutionalized and so normal for a lot of us that it's going to take a lot of self-awareness and deprogramming to understand the things about society that we might not pay attention to, because I have privilege, so there are things about society that before I was educated, I didn't really pay attention to it. I never really thought about, like, one time I locked my keys in my car and I broke into my own car to get back into my, to just get back in. And my boyfriend, who is Afro-Latino, I once joked about that, and he was like, oh, I could never do that. I would get arrested. Even if you were standing right there with me, if I was seen climbing through the trunk of your car, I would get arrested.
Right.
And that was shocking. And so things like that, becoming self-aware, really understanding that there are things that are stacked against minorities, and we actively have to fight against that, even though it's not our fault right now. Right. But it is our responsibility to change it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so...
Hi, Janae. Hi, Jazia.
Hi, guys! Working to break the cycle and make sure that this problem ends now, that is our responsibility. And so we got to make a new system, and that's what this is, making a new system.
Right. And I love what you said about, your partner saying oh, that's not something I could do. And I'm sure in that moment you were like, wow, I never even thought about something like that. And me being from Iowa, my family being born in Iowa, there's a lot of different problems that affect us specifically here in Texas that are not the issue in Iowa. So, for example, I have a lot of biracial cousins and different things like that. And I actually want to speak from their point of view, because I recognize as well something that a lot of people deal with here, especially of mixed race, have that identity crisis that they have to struggle with as well. And that's something I think moving forward we need to do better as well as a nation, because we kind of make people choose. You're either black or you're black, really, in the eyes of most Americans. But what will happen is, depending on the crowd they're with, it's, oh, you're too black to be with us, or oh, you're too white to be with us. So that's also something I think that hopefully this movement is bringing awareness to, and is also impacting, because colorism is also very much real. And people who are multiracial and multicultural are also having difficulties identifying with this movement because of, their own experiences as kids, by being forced to choose a side when really they are all of the above. So that's something that I hope people don't have to deal with and I say that too because they lived in Texas for a little bit and they dealt with that mostly here. But when they moved back to Iowa, they never dealt with it again. So, stuff like that's crazy to me. Melody asked, she said, what do you think is the best way for people in your community to get involved? So in Dallas, I know we have like a fund going around to help people who are being incarcerated at protests. I actually have a friend who is working for the police station right now to help protesters as well. So that's definitely one way. Again, calling locally. We still are seeing different people who have been victims of police brutality. They're I don't want to say murderers, but essentially that's what they are have still not been incarcerated yet. Breonna Taylor, her, the people that killed her, unfortunately have not had any consequences yet. So just making sure that we're not forgetting and making sure that we're educating ourselves and each other and having these critical conversations with our family members and that sort of thing to make sure that we are not getting complacent, because this is not a one-off thing.
Yeah, I think locally, the biggest thing that each of us could do is work in that education route and make sure that the fire doesn't die. Because we've seen this over and over again. Every time something horrible happens, it's a big deal for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a couple months. But for example, Flint, Michigan is still an issue, and it's been 7 years, or I don't know. Someone figure that out, but it's a lot. I don't know that off the top of my head, but so that is the biggest thing we can do, and it starts locally. So making sure you keep the fire, and when your city council people go up for election, do some research. What is their stance on these issues? Are they progressive? Do they want to rebuild the system in a more equitable way? Because those are the people who designate, it's not sheriffs, what is
They're like the elected, or the officials in the... Yeah.
Police officials. There's a specific word.
Like leadership. Yeah, I know what you're
saying. And they're in charge of the things that happen in your city on a day-to-day basis. So really getting involved now, educating yourself now while the fire is burning so brightly, and then keep it going. Don't just forget about it when we come out of quarantine or when people aren't in the streets every single night. This is a lifelong thing. We will be battling this probably to the end of time. It'll just get easier and easier as we go.
Yeah. And then I want to ask you, Natalie, as a white person, what do you feel like and I honestly think a lot of people ask that, like, what can I do as a white person? And it's like, you can do the same thing I can do. But what do you think that you could be doing to specifically, I guess, attack this issue?
Okay, wait 1 second. Shazia is saying, thanks for bringing up colors. Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Because
I was worried that
even in my own household, my sister is beautiful and chocolate, and I know myself, I'm lighter than she is, but growing up, people would tell her she's, pretty for a dark skin, whatever that's supposed to mean. And, oh, Lord. Yeah, colorism is a totally different beast, but it's definitely something that still exists. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Jeffrey fact-checked me. It was 7 years ago. Thank you very much. Okay, sorry. You were asking me specifically what I feel like I could do as a white person.
Right.
Well, definitely one of the big things and one of the things that a lot of people are doing right now is monitoring police force. So if you're driving by and you see a traffic stop and it is a person of color being stopped and there's a lot of officers, or even if there's only one right now, really easy thing to do. Pull over, pull out your phone, ask how is it going. Just express that you want to make sure nothing gets out of hand. And it is very important to not do this aggressively, because our job is to make sure nothing goes out of hand.
Right.
That, you know.
And I want to point that out too.
Yeah.
A lot of people will say at protests as well, if you, especially as a non-person of color, make sure you're not escalating any of those situations. You're there for support. You know, and a lot of people have even pointed out some of the people starting the violence and stuff. A lot of them haven't been people of color, and that's really disheartening, because the narrative is being painted as though, you know, these thugs are being, you know, the protesters, when truthfully, a lot of people want peaceful protests, including people of color.
Yeah, and so that is, you know, that is our job, to make sure there is a safe enough space for things to change, because, you know, unfortunately, because we have privilege and, you know, there's this whole systematic thing, we are able to do that. So I'd say that's something that's unique to white privilege. And also about like vandalism and issues and violence being started at protests. I was horrified. I was at the Denton protest, I guess 2 days ago now, and the only act of vandalism was a white guy. And so, you know, it is our job to make sure that we aren't part of the problem. And yes, Megan, it is our job, but the police are helping too. Yeah. And that kind of leads into, we need to demand police reform, because we ultimately shouldn't have to
police the police.
Yeah, police the police. Yes, Megan. Creating the safe space. Yeah. So ultimately, it is the police's job to create this safe space, and I am very happy with the Denton Police Force. It was a peaceful protest. They were great. I know it hasn't been like that in a lot of cities, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And so, back to what I was talking about. I get very topsy-turvy.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, police reform, that's also something that when we go to the polls, whenever your local elections are, or if you're going to city council meetings and talking about policies that are being implemented, look at what regulations are already enforced in your police precincts and see what can be changed. And on my Facebook page, I just posted something about this, where they did some studies, and very, very minimal regulations, like don't kneel on people's throats, are extremely effective. So just comprehensive, simple police reform could do so much for us.
And to piggyback off of what you're saying as well, I think this goes for everybody. Making sure that we are paying attention to what we're retweeting and that we are doing our own research. That is also quintessential right now, because it's so easy to post a black square and have no clue why you're posting it. Or you're doing this because, you know, I don't want to say it's an easy way out, but essentially making sure that you are truly meaning what you say and you're doing it in a comprehensive way. I think that's also part of why we are at this point, because people are complacent. They're like, okay, I'm going to retweet, I'm going to do this. But when it's time to put your money where your mouth is, you know, and you hear racist remarks or you see someone on the street being arrested and it looks a little excessive, you don't say anything. You don't do anything, you know. And so it's really important to make sure we're understanding completely what it is you're trying to support. And of course, I think this is a really worthy cause. But again, making sure you're just looking at all facets. There was one quote that's sitting on the top of my head right now that someone pointed out, and it's not what you say, also it's how you say it. Just like, if you're talking about, you know, it's really unfortunate they're protesting, but, vandalizing things, but it's so much worse that, you know, someone lost their life, you know, because of excessive police brutality, rather than, it's unfortunate that a guy died, but why are they vandalizing things? You know,
Yeah.
that your priority. What are you prioritizing? Especially, I know a lot of our followers, or my followers specifically, are believers. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, if you truly believe that we were created equally and we were created in God's image, then where the priority in that sentence should be on the people, because things can be replaced, people cannot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. That was great. Be mindful, and I know it is so easy to hop on the social media train and feel like and actually be doing a lot. Social media can be very impactful. It has, spurred the arrests of the officers in charge or responsible for George Floyd's death. So that and the protesting and the outrage has been so helpful. But, back to keeping that fire burning, it can't just be a social media post.
Right.
You can't just post about it or post a black square and not know what it means and not truly believe it and not actually evaluate your value system and see whether or not you're part of the problem, which is
Right.
very hard to sit down and be like, what have I internalized?
Right.
Because it's real. I mean, I've had those conversations with myself, and sometimes it's really awful, but you have to be real with yourself before you can change.
Right. And I love that, because so many people have been talking about unlearning negative habits. I think that's something that's really important right now too. Recognizing maybe there was something that was not perfect about the way, you were taught growing up, and deciding, I want to be better than that. I want to be an improvement on my parents' design. And I also want to help them improve, of course, but I want to make sure that moving forward, I'm confident in what they've taught me. And if it's not worth keeping and worth holding on to, I'm going to change it. And I'm going to be confident in what I change it to. So just being intentional about who you are allowing yourself to be. Black people should not be the only people posting all the information about how to, sign petitions and this. And a great example is Natalie. She, posts as much information as I do. I would say Madison Fuller is also really great at it. Our former Miss Texas. I've seen her post so much about this sort of thing, and she's on her honeymoon.
Yeah, so, and I would just like to say there are definitely holes in social media. So if you're not like getting a pat on the back, that's fine. If you're doing great, you're doing great. Believe in yourself.
Those are just two people I just distinctly knew off the top of my head. And sometimes too, social media is not everybody's thing. So also, do not feel overwhelmed, because it can be a lot of information. Me and Natalie were just talking about how the oxygen on social media right now is most of it's being channeled to the Black Lives Matter movement and to that sort of thing. So it can be overwhelming, and sometimes you need to step back and just, that's okay too. Mental health is important as well.
Yeah. And Jeffrey commented something really awesome. Admission of a racist system is not admitting that I am a horrible person.
Right.
I love how that's packaged. That's great. We need to, make some cards, stick it on your mirror in the morning if you need to. Say it to yourself. Admit the system is racist, but it doesn't make us horrible. It just makes us want to change. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Great addition right there. So do you want to start talking about the Miss America org in regard to this?
So that's another really big question, I think, that ran through my head, especially once a lot of this started happening. Even before, because this is not the first time we've had social issues of this nature. So the question is, should we as title holders refrain from posting about things like Black Lives Matter or, something like that? I think it's so important that we talk about things like this. We're in an organization that essentially advocates for minority. We're preparing the women for the world and the world for great women. And as a double minority, as a woman and a person of color, I know that I have personally dealt with things because I was a woman. And it's not the same, but it is similar to things that I've dealt with because I am Black. So essentially, to not advocate is almost to not be an ally for something that a lot of women know all too well. I know what it feels like to be looked over because I'm a female, so it's the same concept. And the Miss America program has evolved to be, a place where people can advocate for social issues and that sort of thing. So I think it's important that we utilize the space and follow suit, because the Miss America system did put out a comment essentially saying, individuals of color and that sort of thing.
And they sent out to all of us title holders, I don't want to call it a memo, but I don't have a better word for it, saying that not only are we allowed to, but we are encouraged to talk about these issues in the world. Because like Jaylene said, we are first and foremost an organization meant to prepare great women for the world, and the world for great women, which, my favorite little quote that we use. And wow, I lost my train of thought because I looked.
It's okay. I know I'm cute, girl. You got distracted.
Yeah, I was looking at Jaylene. Those earrings are just so fun.
Oh my gosh.
I remember what I was going to talk about. But so in that scope of being encouraged to talk about world issues and having sort of a unique platform, all of us are encouraged to develop our own social platform, and a lot of what we do is centered around that. I talk about the environment a lot. My platform is Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots, but sustainability and environmentalism has so much to do with minorities and equality and making sure that resources are equally distributed. And so it is important to find that unique aspect, because something as huge as institutionalized racism can apply to every single platform out there. So find a way to talk about it, and find that niche where you can make a difference, because that's really what matters, is finding that little thing that you are so passionate about that you're never going to give up. And saying that you're going to fix all of institutionalized racism is a lot for just one human to put on their shoulders.
Right.
So, my thing is the environment, which is also a lot to put on one human's shoulders, and it gets deeper than that. But specifically educating young people about what they can do to take charge of their own life, and that very much goes into educating young people about how they can take charge in this system that we've built within local politics and school programs, doing volunteer service, really getting involved civically and in your community. And so that really can have so much impact on inequality and racism as well.
Right. And the same thing would apply to my platform as well, with Feed Our Neighbors. When we talk about food deserts and, inability to access healthy food, that those numbers are disproportionately, affected by people of color, or people of color are disproportionately affected by hunger and that sort of thing. And it's because of, like you said, of institutionalized racism. So most platforms go hand in hand with them. I could go down the list and show you in some way how they are related, because in America, that a lot of the people who are dealing with poverty and are dealing with that sort of thing are people of color. Yeah. So, like she said, it's just making it applicable. Do I think that should be everything you post about? Not necessarily, but I think when it's relevant, like with any other issue, you make a point to talk about it. And you make a point to address it when you can. And like we're doing right now, we're using these platforms to talk about these conversations, because some people otherwise wouldn't know where to start. Maybe they're not comfortable asking. Well, hey, let's figure it out together,
Yeah, and I mean, anyone watching now or in the future, because we will post this, if you have questions, direct message us. Or, I want to say any of the Miss America title holders, but most of us are pretty chill with answering your questions online. Right. So don't feel like there's a wall. If you have a specific question about this, about anything else, let us know, because I would love to have a conversation about it.
Right. And that's where it all really starts. That's what we're doing right now, because we know how powerful words are. Me and Natalie, we're friends. So
we talk a lot.
We really do. And even with that, even with talking so much, we haven't talked about everything.
Yeah.
And we agree on a lot, but we don't agree about everything. So it's just important to have those conversations, because we want to see other people's point of views. You want to be empathetic and understand where people are coming from. And I can confidently say, I know when Natalie speaks, she speaks from a place of understanding and empathy. And not just because she's my friend, but because she genuinely is one of those people who wants to hear people first before she speaks. And I think that's an important trait for anybody, but especially an ally.
Yeah, I think that distinction for allies, circling back all the way to the beginning of what we do, as allies for this specific issue, and also anything, LGBTQ is what comes to mind, allies in that context. The biggest thing an ally can do in any inequality issue like this is listen to those who are being oppressed and amplify their voices. The world doesn't necessarily need to hear me. They need to hear Jaylene.
But they need to hear Natalie's too, because the thing is, she might reach somebody that I can't.
Yeah, so we are amplifying each other's voices, and that's where the collaboration really matters, because there are some things that don't affect me with this issue. There are some things that do. My relationship is multicultural. Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, interracial.
Interracial, there's the word. And that has really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Not to jump the gun, none of the adults watching this freak out, but if we had kids together, don't freak out. Hypothetical, I could have biracial children, and that's terrifying. And really thinking about that, completely hypothetical, Mom. Really, I'm just worried that someone's gonna slip in and be
that's the reality, because it's the same for me. If I have kids one day, they're going to be black, whether I have them with a black man or Caucasian, whatever. They're going to be black.
We'll see them
as the same reality I will have. The essence that I will have to worry about potentially my children one day. My nephew, I actually had a dream about him the other day. He's 13 years old, y'all. And I woke up and I decided to not go back to sleep, because I did not want to continue that dream, because he was at a protest at 13 years old, and in the dream he got shot in his arm, and I woke up and I decided to not go back to sleep. And I should not be having dreams like that, and Natalie shouldn't either. If she chooses to, or if she has, biracial, Afro-based children. So, and what's also, going back to the colorism issue we were talking about earlier as well, my nephew is light-skinned though, so I literally, when I woke up, I was like, well, that would never happen to him, because most of the people who have been, I'm being honest, y'all, don't judge me, most of the people who have dealt with police brutality are of darker skin. Yeah. And that's the reality, unfortunately. And I think that, like Jazia said, colorism is a whole different topic, but it's also very much so related.
Yeah.
So, hi Chandler, I saw that you joined.
I know, I'm very excited. Kind of near the end, but
right.
Okay, is there anything we haven't covered? We have some points.
I guess some history.
Okay, yeah. So we talked about how understanding Black history, and especially Black American history, is so important, because I think, the phrase that I hear most often is, but slavery doesn't exist anymore. But so therefore racism doesn't exist anymore. And I think that comes from a place of ignorance, because if you really do any research, I'm not even talking about hardcore research. If you look into anything about American history that comes from reputable, non-biased sources, which that is important, reputable, non-biased sources. And unfortunately, that doesn't always mean your school textbook. But if you really look into it, racism is still very alive. And I was really shocked my freshman year of college. I was doing a research paper and kind of stumbled across something that was like, oh, the real estate industry is fundamentally racist. And I was like, oh, that's like a very big statement. Let's look into it. Because I hadn't picked a topic yet. I wasn't expecting to find anything. I kind of thought it would be one of those things where it just leads to a different paper topic. But unfortunately, I found a ridiculous amount of factual information about institutionalized racism and discrimination inside the real estate industry, which after the civil rights movement, basically the National Association of Real Estate Agents wrote into their constitution that you could not sell a house to a Black family in an upper middle class or higher white neighborhood. So this is post civil rights. This is, I'm talking mid to late 80s, maybe even early 90s, where it was written into the Constitution that you had to segregate neighborhoods. And I'm talking the Constitution of the National Association of Realtors, because
right.
Not the United States Constitution. But things like that, I mean, how would you find that? It was just something that I stumbled across, but it makes a lot of sense now because there are these really rich, very white suburbs, and you know, it is so hard as a minority, obviously not speaking from personal experience, but it is so hard as a minority to break into those. And those rich suburbs are where you get the great education, and it's where you develop familial wealth and generational wealth. And it gives you a community, it gives you a pool and, you know, a gated place where you can always be safe. And all of these things that, even though we had the civil rights movement, even though we had the Civil War, there is so much discrimination just built into where people are living, the infrastructure of cities, inner city schools, all of these things. And it goes so deep. I could talk for like hours and hours. If I whipped up my notes, I could do longer.
Right.
Basically, educate yourself because, like we said earlier, it's not that the system is broken, it's that the system is racist.
There you go. And I mean, just piggybacking off of what Natalie said even further, there's so much. I took a Black Woman in Society class, I think it was last year, and I was surprised at how much knowledge I knew that my peers did not know. Fortunately for me, my grandmother, they literally call her Mother Kwanzaa in Iowa because she's so highly respected in not only the Black community, but just everyone, and they are very aware that she knows. And unfortunately for African Americans, especially whose ancestors were slaves, we don't know the direct ties between our ancestors super far back. But she takes it upon herself to still learn that history because it still is our history. And I was taught that at a very young age, and I recognized a lot of my peers were not. Black, white, because we had some Hispanic, white people in that class, all sorts of stuff. And a lot of people still didn't know, Black people too. And I was really surprised. Some of it I thought was important. Some people don't know who Sarah Bartman is. I advise you to go look her up and see how cruelly that some of our African American, I don't want to say famous people, but why they're famous. It's really strange. And just different things of that nature. And even I just want to take a moment to talk about intersectionality. Being like I said earlier, being a female and being Black in the education system, that's not one, but two strikes against me. So, people, when they look at the statistics of who's doing well in school, white men normally do super well. The system was created for them. White women, not so much. Black men, not so much. Black women, they do pretty well too. here's the thing though, because the system was not, focused on them, the education system was not designed with them in mind. They have very unhealthy, I even had very unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And just having the lack of representation in the classroom as well can kind of create that sort of thing as well. And essentially, growing up and getting older and finally having a Black teacher and going, oh, I can do well in school, that's when things started getting better for me personally. Stuff like that, we don't even, just educate yourself. Seriously, there's so much knowledge out there.
And Danae actually commented, The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein,
Right.
or Stein, depending on where he's from, is a great book about redlining and government-led segregation. So I'm writing that down. I will add that to the link that we provide after this.
Right.
Thank you, Danae. I will be putting that on my reading list.
Right. And I have so many recommendations. I'll just have to put them in the link because I can't even. But yeah, there's so many good resources out there, and even just a Google search on just like Black history, and I'm not just talking about MLK.
Yeah,
I'm not just talking about.
There is more,
because there's so much. Frederick Douglass, even like Rosa Parks. I'm trying to think. There's so many people. I'm just having a brain fart because I have so many people come to my brain.
We're not superheroes, so we will consult the notes and post the link afterwards.
Exactly. So
neither of us have photographic memories.
Right, and if you truly are interested, I just recommend it a gazillion times to do your own research, because we can give you links all day, but you have to actually make that effort. Like, we can't make that effort for you. I mean, we can try our best and give you a link, but
yeah. You still got to click on it. You still got to keep going.
Right. So, go ahead.
What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to just mention the Read the Room hashtag.
Oh, yeah. You go for it.
So one other thing I would like to mention is I know it can be really difficult to, especially with this newfound awareness for some people, to know how to address certain issues, or even if you want to go back to your regularly scheduled program, I think you need to be very cautious of how you approach that, because right now it is a tense social situation. So if people are talking mostly about racial inequality and that sort of thing, make sure that you're not going so far off that you are pretty much changing the subject, or what's the appropriate word, just
redirecting, maybe.
Right. Just make sure you're aware of the situations. I just think that's an important thing. Not only, I think most particularly for social media.
Yeah, I think especially like in a normal conversation, changing the subject from something very heavy like racial inequality to puppies and rainbows and fun stuff is usually something that you can, find a pathway to, and it'll be fine, and you can read the room there and get tone of voice and do it eloquently. But on social media, if everyone is talking about one thing and you just go off on your bubbles and rainbow puppies and all the sweet and amazing stuff, that's fine. Just read the room. Hashtag read the room.
Right.
Find the right time, the right place, the right forum.
Yeah.
Because some people might take that badly.
Right.
Don't be deaf. Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of tension, that may not be the best way to relieve it. And depending on who you're talking to, maybe it will be. But, be aware.
Right. And I think that was just something I wanted to bring up, because I've just seen recently, some people are like, oh, this is not my regular content, and da-da-da-da. And that's okay. If you have to get off social media for a few days, if this is overwhelming, that's completely normal. I've had to kind of back up a little bit too.
Yeah.
Me and Natalie actually went to the lake one day.
Yeah. Because we were like, we just got to put down the phone, sit in nature, not deal with this for, like 10 hours.
Right. Because sometimes it's not even sometimes, on the regular basis, it is, necessary to relieve yourself. You shouldn't be overwhelmed all the time. So,
and that, so I know we're like coming up to an hour and we're going to be done, but that goes on to when a protest or initiative like this is so large. The nice thing is people are always coming up to take your place. So if you got to take a step back from the front lines, someone will step forward and pick it back up. And, it's not just you. So really make sure to take care of yourself. It can be a lot. Do what you can when you can. But what's most important is you come back.
Right.
Coming back, you take your break and then you come back, and we keep this fire burning until we have changed the system.
Right. And that's such a beautiful thing to point out, because I think some people too are like, oh, well, I can't go out and protest. I can't, that's okay. My mom's not going to let me protest. Coronavirus is real. And she will not allow me to step a foot out the house if I'm not going to the store, or, that sort of thing. Just going with people that I know are fine. So, but this is not the first nor the last time that I've had the desire to protest. I've protested before. This social issue is not one that just popped up just because George Floyd was killed. Unfortunately, he was maybe, he was just a number on a list that has been happening for a very long time. Right. So this is something I've done before, and you can't be mad at yourself for not knowing the right thing to say or the right thing to do. This is an ongoing conversation. This is an ongoing process. And until we have fixed it, just know that you will have to keep coming back. But like Natalie said, the idea is to make actual change. We have to continue, and we have to consistently decide to fight for this issue. If it's something that's important for you, then that's what we have to do.
Yeah. Make it one of your voting points.
Right. So,
I think...
go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to make sure to hit.
Right.
What about you?
I was just going to say, for if we have any title holders on here, with this newfound awareness, just make sure you're, again, like we said, reading the room and being aware, even in social situations, that just because you're white or whatever it is, non-black or whatever, just because you're not the person in the situation, if you have learned and you have been soaking in this information, you have a place to speak to. Like, this is about, right now, this is about Black Lives Matter, but we need the support of every single person to make this happen the way that we need it to. So don't think that you're irrelevant to the conversation or, that sort of thing. I think it's so aggravating to me, honestly, when people think that they don't matter. It's like the same thing when people say my vote doesn't count. It doesn't count if you don't use it.
That's the only time it doesn't count. The only time your vote doesn't count is when you vote.
Exactly. So in the same way, just do not feel defeated because of, your skin color. That's the opposite of what we want.
Yeah.
Don't, think that this doesn't matter. But just take this going forward. When you're going into schools, make sure you tell a little Black girl that her hair is cute too. Or you like her shoes too. Just being aware and making sure you make adjustments as necessary moving forward.
Yeah.
So, that's
definitely
really all I have to say.
All right. Well, I think we're done. Pretty sure we can only do an hour anyway.
Right.
But we will save this and repost it, and we'll post it on Facebook too. Sorry to anyone who started on Facebook and then it didn't work. And we'll post all of the links that we have. But obviously, we are not the only source of information. There is tons of information out there right now, especially with how prominent this issue is at the moment. So, feel free to do your own research.
Right. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We love you all. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We know that you could have been doing something better with your time. So thank you for listening to us. Little Grapevine in Carrollton. We want to see change as much as everyone else does. So please play your part. If you don't know, again, like she said, if you don't know where to start, what to do, absolutely pay attention to our stories. In this next 24 hours, we will be pushing some information out there. We love you all. We hope that you're staying safe in coronavirus.
Wear your masks.
Wear your mask. Stay 6 feet away from me.
Yeah.
And just if you're a Christian, stay prayed up, making sure that we are praying for the peace of our world and our nation right now, because there is a lot of craziness going on. But just be well, you guys. We love you all. And I'm so glad that y'all tuned in.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.